False mistake of cheating husband. She was short, chubby, with large breasts, 40 DDD according to her, and long, thick black hair. But she had something that most short, chubby girls don't have. She was very attractive. There was something about her, an aura, if you will, that just radiated from her. When she would walk into a room and you would see her, you would immediately have desire, your palms would get wet, and your eyes would not take your eyes off her. The funny thing is, she never realized it. I work as a service manager for a trailer sales and repair company, and I first saw Nadine when she and her husband came in to buy a new horse trailer. I was standing behind the service counter when she walked in, and immediately all of the things I mentioned above happened. My eyes followed her everywhere as she walked around the showroom. She was wearing skinny jeans, tennis shoes, a tank top, her hair was braided into a thick black braid, and everything about her screamed, "Have sex with me!" She looked around the racks of parts, peered into the bumper of the two horses on display on the showroom floor, and then left. I hated to see her go, but I'm not sure I could have stood to see her stay there much longer. More than anything, I wanted to go to the men's room and smack myself. But then the phone rang and I went back to work. The next time I saw Nadine was 2 weeks later, when she and her husband brought their old trailer in to assess its possible trade-in value. Her black hair was loose and curling around as she browsed the parts counters and truck accessory displays again. Hiding behind the counter, she didn't see my eyes following her around the room. Finally, her husband came in, picked her up, and they left. It was a good thing I was single, because I would have had a hard time explaining to my wife why I spent so much time in the bathroom. Nadine arrived 2 days later to turn in her old trailer and hook up the new one, and although she didn't go into the store, I watched from the window as she plugged in her new unit. As she drove away, I hoped it wouldn't be the last time I saw her. 3 weeks later, I was working on my computer when I heard someone walk in the front door. I turned around. It was Nadine. She walked up to the service counter and I said, "Good morning. What can I do for you?" She smiled at me in a way that made my knees shake and said, "I'm having a problem with my new trailer. I can't turn on the interior lights." I asked her to give me a minute to get out of the program I was in, and then followed her to her trailer. It wasn't difficult to troubleshoot, and I had her up and running in about 5 minutes. She asked me how much she owed for the service, and I told her it was nothing, that we would consider it warranty work. "How nice of you," she said in a voice that made my toes tingle, reached into her purse and pulled out a $5 bill. "Here, let me at least give you this for your trouble." I politely declined, but at the last moment said, "Someday I'll let you buy me a cup of coffee." She grinned and said, "It's a date." As she drove out of the parking lot, I stared after her until she was out of sight. It was almost 6 weeks before I saw her again. She hit something in the road and blew a tire. She had put the spare on and now she needed a new one. I sold her the tire, mounted and balanced it, and as she was writing me a check to pay the bill, she looked at her watch and said, "It's lunchtime and I owe you a cup of coffee. Is there a decent establishment nearby?" I was actually going to say, "Yes. My apartment is only a 5-minute walk from here." But what I really said was, "There's a Denny's down the street." She climbed into my pickup and I realized that I would spend the entire next year ogling the seat she was sitting in. Along the way, we made the usual small talk, nothing much, just questions about how long I'd been working at the trailer, whether I liked my job, how she liked the new trailer, that sort of thing. It wasn't until we were sitting at Denny's restaurant that she asked a question that made my face turn red. "Why are you looking at me the way you do? Since I first came to the salon, you haven't taken your eyes off me once." I stuttered and hummed and waved it off, and nothing coherent seemed to come out of my mouth, and she smiled again and said, "Don't be embarrassed. I like the way you look at me." Then her mood changed and she said, "I only wish my husband could look at me like that." She then began to tell me that she thought he had lost interest in her, that they hardly make love anymore, and that she thought he probably had a girlfriend on the side. He goes out at night, disappears for hours at a time, and when he comes back, he smells like he just took a shower, and he won't tell me where he's been. The only thing I can think of is that he's having sex with some cheating girl and has to wash her stink off of himself before he comes home. It's just not fair. I have so much to give and he doesn't even want it." She saw the look on my face and said softly, "But you want to, don't you? I see that expression on your face every time you look at me. I'm really sorry about that. I shouldn't have talked to you like that, but you seem so nice, and I needed someone to talk to." I brushed her off, and after that lunch passed in silence. When the check came, she reached for it, but I snatched it away. "You were going to buy me coffee," I said, "not lunch. So you still owe me coffee, and maybe I'll get a chance to see you again." The drive to work was as silent as lunch, and when we pulled up to the house, she got out of my car and headed for hers. Halfway there, she turned around and came back. She handed me a piece of paper and said, "Call me, tonight, anytime after 6, and then turned and walked away. For the rest of the day, I couldn't do anything worthwhile because my mind wasn't on work, but on that little piece of paper in my pocket. I kept pulling it out and looking at it. Even her handwriting was attractive. Why me? I left work at 5 and was home at 5:10. For the next 50 minutes, I sat there staring at my phone while thoughts continued to swirl in my head. Do I really need this? Why should I drive myself crazy over a woman who could never be mine? Calling her only prolongs the agony. Better to just put her out of my mind and move on with my life. At 6 minutes past 1, I dialed the numbers on my phone, and after 2 rings, her throaty voice said, "Hello?" My tongue was slurring. I couldn't say anything and was about to hang up when she said, "I was wondering if you would call. I'm making coffee. Do you want to come over to my place and get that cup I promised you?" I stood with the phone to my ear, stunned by the invitation, and she replied, "That's okay. It's one of my husband's nights out tonight, and I could use the company, a friendly face I could talk to." Against my better judgment, I asked for directions. The drive took half an hour, and as I pulled up to her house, I realized how lonely she could feel. Her lot covered 600 acres of land near District 21, and for 5 miles I didn't see a single house. She met me at the door, led me into the kitchen, poured me a cup of coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked. Mostly she talked, and I listened. She mostly told me her life story, how she and her husband were childhood sweethearts, married right out of high school, what their hopes and dreams were, and suddenly it was 10 o'clock, and she looked at me and said, "Look, what am I babbling on about? You just sat there and listened, and I didn't even give you a chance to say a word. Next time you'll talk and I'll listen." "There will be a next time, won't there? Please don't say no. I need someone I can talk to." How could I say no? She walked me to the door, and just before she left, she stood on tiptoe and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks for being a friend. He's leaving again the day after tomorrow. Come have coffee with me." Again, how could I say no? On the way home, I wondered why I had allowed myself to be in this position. Suddenly, I was a shoulder to cry on, a friend to listen to all her troubles, and I had no one to blame but myself. On Wednesday, Nadine called me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. "You're coming over tonight, aren't you?" I wanted to say no and stop driving myself crazy, but I agreed, and she said she would have coffee ready for me when I arrived. She met me at the door, sat me down at the kitchen table, and poured me a cup of coffee. "Be right back," and left the room. I added cream and sugar to the cup and was stirring the coffee while looking down when I heard her say, "Do you think my breasts are too big?" I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway with no clothes on. I guess most guys like to look at her. I don't know why I always thought my legs were my best feature. I stared at her, hesitant to take a breath lest she turn around and walk away. She was the epitome of a sex goddess. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" She walked over to me and I noticed that she had really nice legs, which she made even sexier by wearing high-heeled shoes. She walked over to me. She looked up at me. "I know I'm being a cheeky cheater, but I'm human, and I have needs that need to be taken care of." I know you want to have sex with me, but I also know you're too nice a guy to make a move on me, so I'm taking matters into my own hands." And she did. She looked at me again. "You're not going to run away from me, are you?" And when I didn't say anything back, she smiled slightly and said, "Of course you're not going to. You're too nice a guy to do that to me." And then stroked my body first. She stood up and leaned forward. "Kiss me, lover. Taste what Nadine tastes like with you." It was the hottest kiss I had ever experienced, and when it was over, she took my hand and led me into her bedroom. Back at home, I lay there looking at the ceiling and wondering why I was so unlucky to find the girl of my dreams and she ended up married to someone else. I couldn't understand how her husband could stay away from her, how he could want to spend time with another woman when he had Nadine at home. Nadine was the most fantastic woman in my life, and she wanted to do everything. But of course we couldn't. Her husband usually got home at 11:30, so she had to have me out of the house by 10:30 to ensure she had a safety margin. As I was leaving, she asked, "The day after tomorrow, same time?" I responded by hugging her and kissing her passionately before she pushed me out the door. The next day at noon, I was surprised to see Nadine pull up to the house. She walked in and asked, "Have you had lunch yet?" I replied that I hadn't, and she said, "Then let's go. It's my treat." We went outside and she said, "I'll drive this time." And when we pulled away from the lot, she said, "Tell me how to get to your house." I looked at her and she smiled at me. "I said my treat, lover, and you are my treat. I can't wait for tomorrow night." I was very, very late getting back from lunch. Every time I tried to get out of bed, Nadine would pull me back and find a way to get me to have sex again. Before she drove me to work, I gave her a key to my apartment so she could meet me there instead of at work. There was no point in risking her husband finding out, and if Nadine and I left there together too often, it was bound to be noticed. For the next 2 weeks, I went to Nadine's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and she did her best to have sex with me to death. Almost every day during the week, I came home for lunch and found her in bed waiting for me. It was both good times and bad times. The good times were every minute spent with her, and the bad times were when I was alone. Because that's when I had to face reality. I knew it had to end. One day, after we finished lunch, Nadine asked me to do her a favor. She wanted me to follow her husband and find out where he went and see who he met. I was a little reluctant to do it, but an absolutely gorgeous kiss convinced me to honor her request. That Wednesday night, I was waiting at the intersection of County Road 21 and Highway 73 when my cell phone rang and Nadine informed me that her husband had just left the house. A few minutes later, his truck pulled up to a stop sign and turned left. I gave him a 30-second head start and then pulled out of the Texaco station and followed. 15 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of Barron's Roadhouse and went inside. I got out of the car and followed him, but once inside, I didn't see him anywhere, so I sat down at the end of the bar and ordered a beer. About 5 minutes later, Nadine's husband came out of the back room, tying on an apron, and walked behind the bar. He walked over to the bartender, who was just setting the beer in front of me, and said, "Okay, Sid, your help is here." The bartender looked at his watch and said, "You're half an hour early." Nadine's husband, his name was Dale, said, "I know, but I could use the extra time." Sid asked, "How close are you to getting your wife a horse?" And Dale replied that another 6 weeks would be fine. Sid asked him if he was going to quit then, and Dale replied, "Well, I like it here, and I like the people who work here, and I like most of the regulars. But I'd really rather be home with Nadine. As soon as I get her a horse for her birthday, I'll be out of here." So, that was it. The end I always knew was coming. I finished my beer and left. On the way to Nadine's, the thought crossed my mind to tell her that Dale had met a gorgeous blonde named Wanda or something like that. That would have given me another 6 weeks, but in the end, I realized I couldn't do that. Eventually, Nadine would find out I'd lied to her, and I didn't want that to happen. If she ever came to service her trailer, I wanted her to be able to smile warmly at me. When I got to her house, I told her what I had learned, and I saw her face change, whether from grief that she had misjudged her husband or from contempt for herself for cheating on him. I didn't know. I said, "I'm sorry, Nadine," and turned to leave. Just as I reached the door, she said, "And where do you think you're going?" I turned to her and replied, "Well, now that you know he's not cheating on you, I thought you might want me to leave." She smiled. "Nothing has changed, baby. He's not here and you are, and Nadine needs a man to play with." When it was over, she gave me her first ever soft and gentle kiss and said, "I always said you were a nice guy, but I have a confession to make to you, and when I'm done, you might think I'm not very nice. I lied to you when I told you that Dale doesn't make love to me anymore. He does it almost every night. I got into a relationship with you because I thought he was cheating on me, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. If cheating was good enough for him, it would be good enough for me. I chose you because I wanted a good guy, someone who would treat me well, not like a cheating husband leaving me. I fell in love with you, and I don't intend to let you go. You've turned me into your cheating husband, and I love it, and I'm not going to stop. It'll be harder to do that when he quits his part-time job, but at least we'll still have lunch hours. Face it, baby. Nadine needs you, and she's not going to let you go. Now have sex with me one more time before you have to leave." That was 3 years ago, and Nadine and I still see each other every chance we get. She loves Dale and has no intention of leaving him. He's crazy about her and won't let go anyway, at least not unless he's terminally stupid. As for me, I take what I can get when I can get it and at least go to bed. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.